Okay, can you see this? Nope, switch the view here. Can you see the presenter's view?
Yep.
Okay, well, it's nice to virtually meet all of you. I hope that before too terribly long, I can meet you in person. As you know, this is going to be an overview of the public access policy and publication compliance and a step-by-step process. I'm happy to share the slides afterwards, of course, as well, but I do have a step-by-step guide that Pam and Mia will distribute afterwards. So I am going to stop my video while I'm presenting, and I will turn it back on when there's questions, or if there's questions at the end. I first want to acknowledge and apologize that we had to reschedule because of my plumbing issue. This picture at the top, of course, I pulled down from the internet. The one at the bottom is actually my kitchen on the morning of the last presentation, and it's equally as bad with the blue fans on the other side of the dishwasher. So again, thanks Nia for rescheduling, and apologies for doing that last minute. So I want to just give an overview, big high level overview of the things that I'll be talking about today. You know, many of you are probably aware of these, and I'm not trying to give a bunch of background, but it's like, oh my goodness, there's a lot. So the National Library of Medicine is it's the world's largest biomedical library, and that's both print and, you know, of course, more recently, electronic. The NCBI is a center that's beneath the NLM. It's a series of databases that contains biomedical and genomic data. You've probably heard of this. Hopefully you are all also aware of My NCBI. It's a dashboard for investigators to maintain their publication list. And then you can see here, I'm sure everyone's familiar with PubMed. You know, this was created, gosh, I don't know how long ago, but it's a database of mainly citations and abstracts. There are some full manuscripts, but not very many. And then PubMed Central, so PMCID, that is really what our focus is going to be. So this is a database of full free text manuscripts. And then the NIH-MS system, that is the system that was developed to facilitate submission into PubMed Central. So that supports the public access policy. So publication costs used to be, the burden used to be on readers to have to buy manuscripts. Now it's on the scientists that are authoring manuscripts. So NIH and most other funders will allow for publication costs to be included in grant budgets. We, the TRI, may have some funds to help with publication costs, should that not have been included in your previous budgets. You know, it's also a possibility to ask the school, college, or departments as well if there's funding. Manuscripts costs vary, but they're generally between, I would say, like $1,500 and $3,000. I just want to note here that the UAMS library does not have publication costs, but they do have other resources. So just keep that in mind, you know, as you're looking to publish. For example, they can help find quality journals and help do literature searches. So what is the NIH public access policy? I won't read this to you. You can see that here, but this was enacted in 2008, and it just ensures that published results are free to the public. It's been around for a long time, but from my experience, I don't think NIH was really holding people's feet to the fire. Now, the main issue is that they can withhold funding. So that is a concern, I think, for any scientist or the PIs of parent awards. So why comply? Of course, we want to accelerate the dissemination of findings to the broader research community. And as I just mentioned, NIH can withhold grant funding. So this can be grant funding for you as new scholars and scientists. But in this case, for awards that are supported by TRI, funding will also be withheld from the PIs of the U, the K, and the T award, if whichever of those buckets that you fall in. So that is an important piece for everyone. And I'll mention this again, but the non-compliance means that you do not have a PMC ID number, which means it has not been, added to that free database within 3 months after the original publication date. And I'll touch on that again. But so this is what we're going to go through today. Like I said, I do have a step-by-step guide, but I just wanted to walk through this. I've got screenshots of the database. So this will be the bulk of my presentation today. So step 1, deposit files. So this ideally needs to be the primary author of a manuscript. It can, in fact, be completed by the principal investigator of a parent award. So, for example, on the K or the U, the PI can actually process this, but of course, it's best practice for a primary author to walk through this process. I'd like to note that the person or the individual that initiates the process, so starts this step 1, is the one that must complete all of the remaining steps. Okay, so I'm keeping this deposit files as the naming convention, because that step slide, which it'll come up again, those are the steps and the titles that NIH has defined. But it's deposit files is actually linking data, completing fields, and then ultimately uploading files. In this step, I would recommend populating from PubMed. Many journals will submit to NCBI, or the National Center for Biotechnology Information, which that auto-populates PubMed. This will save you time because it's going to auto-populate a number of the fields that are needed, and it ensures data integrity, right? That this is aligning with PubMed. I would also recommend that once, and I'll touch on this, but I'm intentionally repeating myself, but once the paper is compliant, to link it to your My Bibliography, and I'll show you that screen as well. So this is a reminder that you are going to need to link it to your funding. So I don't know if we have both K and T keys on the call today, but because of how we are set up, it does need to include, both the UL1 and the K, or both the UL1 and the T. So you'll want to select all of those award IDs. So this is a dashboard for investigators, as I mentioned early on. Many of you may have already started this, but I just wanted to share this screenshot so that you were familiar with what the database looks like. This is where the process would begin if you start with a non-compliant manuscript. But of course, the goal is to initiate this process as soon as it's published, and you won't have to worry about that. Okay, so you've either pre-populated data from PubMed or manually entered it, linked your funding, and now the file uploading begins. So you can see here, it starts with the final published manuscript. There is a naming convention that's required or recommended, but that will be shared in the guide. It is important to note and confirm that all figures, tables, any other supporting materials are actually included in the manuscript. Some online publishers actually link to these items and don't actually include them. So if they're not included, just be sure that you download PDFs and then upload those files here. Okay, final steps of step 1. So in the system, you will need to assign a reviewer. For those of you, if you are a primary author, that reviewer can be you and should be. This step would be, for example, if you delegated to one of your research coordinators. You can do that for that initial process, but delegates are not allowed to be reviewers. And reviewing, I'll show you, that's just going to be, ensuring everything that you entered is correct. So you'll also need to select an embargo period. And that means there may be a delay, which is specified by a publisher between when the article is officially published and when the full version can be made freely available in PubMed Central. It is important to note that even if it's not going to be publicly available, let's say for 12 months, the NIH still, of course, on the back end knows if this process has been completed within 3 months. So it's important to, again, ensure that your manuscript is compliant regardless of that embargo period. There is a link in PubMed Central that can be accessed, that you can access the embargo periods. I had on here that all of them are on PubMed Central, and Nia and I found that they are not. It was a bit of a scavenger hunt, but we did find by looking at the specific journal when those embargo periods are. That list is pretty extensive, but that's just an item of note. Okay, because this isn't confusing enough, or it wasn't, it was for me when I first started. Step 2 is actually called the initial approval. But this is really a part of the whole first process of depositing files. This initial approval is going to happen when you're in the system. So you're going to review these, as I mentioned earlier, review the submission, add any associated funding that you didn't, and then it's going to go for approval to the NIH manuscript submission system. So this is just a screenshot of what that is. Now, if you happen to hit that you agree that everything is accurate, I wouldn't be worried if there is something incorrect. Of course, it does add time to the process, but if there was something missing, for example, you forgot to upload a supplemental table, the NIH staff or NIH-MS manuscript submission staff will contact you for that supporting material. So step 3, this is when the NIH-MS staff reviews the files. They're converting to this archival XML format. And what they say is that this makes the papers publicly available in a format that ensures the permanent preservation of the findings. And it makes it more readily accessible to the public, healthcare providers, educators, etc. So this is pending the conversion. So this is under review. You're almost done. All of the data entry is complete, of course. This typically takes, and this was pre-pandemic, but from my experience, it typically takes like 2 or 3 weeks. So it's not a long review process. I imagine now that they're probably delayed, but that's been my experience. So following the review, step 4 is this final approval. So NIHMS will send an auto-generated email that's just saying, okay, we believe everything is complete, that everything is ready to be submitted to PubMed Central. Please go back in and do, one final review. Just another item of note, this does have to be the same person that initiated the process. So from my experience, these, being auto-generated, kind of a generic email, I think these often were getting deleted before, at least, before people really understood the impact of non-compliance. But this is, it'll be a generic subject line like this. And then the final step after you approve is just acquiring this PubMed Central ID. And then it is compliant and it's linked up to the PubMed record. So then people can access the full text article. They will send, again, another generic email. This is always a nice email to see, I think, going through the process, like, okay, it's been successful. So I would encourage to watch for this email as well after you've gone through that, gone through the process, just to make sure. So as I mentioned before, I would encourage you to continue to monitor your My Bibliography, which is in the NCBI database. If you are an author, even a secondary or tertiary author on another manuscript, in theory, these databases should link it to your bibliography, which means it may not be you that needs to process the manuscripts through compliance. It may be one of your colleagues. So I would encourage you to monitor that. This right-hand column where the circle is can be sorted by public access compliance or not. And if you found one that was non-compliant and you click on edit status there within that circle, this will allow you to begin the process from this step. It's essentially the same here. You can see you'll go back to following these steps, but since it's already linked, you can see here, you'll begin the submission into NIHMS, and then you'll follow the steps that I've just shared with you. Okay, so citing the TRI, when should I cite? You can see here, it is anyone that we directly financially support. And the next slide does have what constitutes TRI support. So I actually won't go into that, but it's projects. We want you to cite us in publications for projects that you do, publications, patents, grants, any other presentations that result from the research supported by TRI. So as I mentioned, please be mindful about acknowledging and citing the appropriate grants. That can be confusing, and I'll link to that webpage, but we're here to help if you ever have questions about if you should and how you should. Nia also manages this citation reporting form, and it's great if you can fill out that form for us. It's brief, but it allows us to know which, on an annual basis as well, which publications that we need to link to our annual report. So I pulled this information down from the TRI website. You can see here a number of the areas that constitutes TRI support where you should be citing us. Again, some of that may be ambiguous to people. And so, if you're uncertain, please feel free to reach out to us. And if you forgot to cite us, it's no worries. We do want to ensure that that does get corrected. I've had to do this a couple of times in my previous position, and I can tell you it was not a laborious issue. And it didn't take very long. I think it took a couple of weeks. That needs to be the primary author that initiates that, but it's just a contacting the journal, and they'll add whatever citation to the acknowledgements in your paper. And just again, as another friendly reminder, KL2 scholars and TL1 trainees also need to cite the parent award. We do have suggested language when citing the TRI on our website. So you can see here, you will just plug in the appropriate awards. And I don't know if you've visited our website, but we do have under, are you seeing the website? Did that pop up on the right screen? Nia, or?
No, I have the link to the site TRI in the chat.
Okay, that's perfect. Whoop, let me go back a slide. So I think all of you are more recent scholars, and so all of the numbers on our website won't be applicable to you. But again, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can help guide you on what the appropriate citation numbers are. And that is it for me. That was kind of the quick and dirty. Again, I know it's a riveting presentation, but it really is important. And it's not complicated. I think it's some of the information that was provided by NIH is not all that simple to follow. Anybody have questions?
I do have a question. So if we check on PubMed and there's always a PMID, but if there's a PMCID, then we're good. We just need to make sure that we cite both grants.
That's correct.
Okay.
So the PMID is just the PubMed ID. PMCID is the PubMed Central, and that's compliant, yes.
Okay.
So, hey, Robin, it's Chrissy. So if any of our publications don't have the PMC ID within 3 months of it being published, it's non-compliant?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now this is, I don't think I actually mentioned, so this is federally funded grants or publications. So in our case, because we're funded by an NIH IC, then all of our papers need a PMC ID.
Okay. Thank you.
I should add too, that's a great point, distinguishing between PMID and PMCID. The NIH does want to see the PMCIDs listed on your biosketch. So when you're submitting biosketches, if you have that ID, please be sure to add that in your citations.
Robin, Dr. Vincenzo put in the chat, is this true for EPUB Online First too? So when it goes online in an EPUB format, how does that factor in?
It's the same. This process still needs to be completed.
So the question is sometimes like they do the online, but then they may not print it for like a year or so.
Right.
So it still goes in the 3 months right after it goes online, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Great questions. I will modify this presentation to include this information if I need to ever give it again. Any other questions? Concerns?
One thing that might be helpful to some people is at the bottom of any of the emails from anybody from TRI, it has that the site where it teaches you how, or it tells you how to cite TRI. It has that website at the bottom of any email from a TRI person.
Yeah, that's great, Chrissy. So the logos that you see at the bottom of our emails are hyperlinked to that web page. So if that's an easier pathway for you than looking for it on the website, you can click on that. Are there any other chats, Nia?
I have one more question. This is Jennifer. I have like a couple abstracts that are cited, but they're printed in for example, the publication as an abstract bill. How does that work for this part? Or does it, is it only for articles?
I couldn't completely hear you, but I think you're asking if this is a required process for published abstracts.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not. This is for full manuscripts.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if any other questions arise, you know, I know the other members of the TRI team can help as well, but please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to assist in any way.
And before we leave, I'll just make a plug that TRI is gearing up for its RPPR process, which means that either Pam or I, or maybe Chrissy might be reaching out to you guys to confirm your published manuscripts, other things too, like enrollment reports and all that good stuff. So please be on the lookout for those emails and get us that information in a timely manner. You probably won't see anything for probably a couple weeks at least, but it will start coming in soon.
Okay, well, thanks for inviting me to do this, Nia. And again, apologies for my my plumbing disaster at the last meeting, but look forward to meeting you all in person before too long.
Well, thank you, Robin. And again, if anyone has any questions that pop up, just email us. This recording will go online probably in a few days. It might be the 1st of next week. And we have the step-by-step guide, which you'll email out, and we'll probably email out the slides as well, or make them available along with the recording where we post the recording. So if you have any questions, just holler, and thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.